Hello, beautiful souls. I'm thrilled you're here to connect with the divine guidance of your angels. Imagine feeling the gentle, loving whispers of your angels guiding you every step of your life. If you're ready to experience that profound connection, book a personal reading at theangelmedium.com by clicking the Readings tab. For those eager to work daily with their angels, join my membership. Every month, we explore a new facet of angel communication through live weekly meetings on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central Time. This isn't just about learning, it's experiencing healing and coming home to know your soul's truest path. And if you're ready to develop your spiritual gifts to the max, join my Angel Reiki School. You can go through the school in two ways. Whether you choose our enlightening online 8-week school starting on the 1st of each month, or join our immersive in-person school in Oak Brook, Illinois from April 11th through the 13th, 2025, you'll gain the skills to become an angel messenger yourself. My school gives you the skills of mediumship, energy healing, and angel messages all at once. You can use these skills to start your own spiritual business or to grow your current career. Step into a life filled with angelic energy, transformation, and unstoppable abundance. Sign up today at theangelmedium.com or check the show notes to book a call with me to chat about which program would be best for you. Your journey with the angels begins now. Let's see what messages they have for you in today's show. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Angels and Awakening podcast. I'm your host and author, Julie Jancius. And friends, today I'm here with Simon Critchley. He's the author of the new book, Mysticism. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much, Julie. Nice to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. So I don't know exactly how to describe you because you describe philosophy as kind of different throughout the times, but I wonder if we could kind of start here. I'm a person who's been deeply religious in my early years. Now I consider myself spiritual, and I know your entire book is about this. Is there a way for us to give people a basis for this conversation by kind of basically defining mysticism, theology, traditional current philosophy, and spirituality? The difference
All right.
between
That's a
these
lot.
four. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And I mean, I teach philosophy as a day job. That's my that's my day job. I teach at the New School for Social Research in New York, but I I have a lot of other interests, and I had a misspent youth and went to college late, and and I played in bands for many years, all of which failed. I was like a dirty punk in England in the late 70s, and the book ends with discussion of music, and in particular kind of post-punk music and especially German music in the early 70s. So a lot of it is about, so I mean, to go back to front, you could say that mystical experience lives on for me in the experience of music and music. And so I say something in the book like, it's impossible to be an atheist when you're listening to the music that you love. So whatever that music happens to be, just sort of insert whichever you want, whichever artist or track you want at that point. But when you're listening to that, when you're communing with that, it feels as if the cosmos is alive, things are speaking to you, and so on and so forth. So there is a kind of mystical rapture in the experience of music, and you can see that in all sorts of different phenomena. So that's a very everyday, easy way to access it. Put your favorite track on, and what you're feeling then, that feeling of kind of being outside yourself, of having pushed yourself aside, and to be open to that experience of something that you love, that means the world to you, is, a modern version of mystical experience. I could say that. And then the other stuff, gosh, where to begin? Mysticism is, there's a very short definition by a woman who was very famous in the early 20th century, has kind of been forgotten, called Evelyn Underhill. She wrote a book called Mysticism, came out in 1911, and she describes mysticism as experience in its most intense form. Experience in its most intense form. So that's a neat way of thinking about it. So an intensity, an aliveness, an ecstasy, a sense of being outside yourself, held somewhere else. And then we can complicate that in tons of different ways. The mysticism is not a religion. It's a tendency within all religions that I'm aware of. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, and so on and so forth. And it's a tendency within those religions, usually something rather special, maybe the peak experiences that those religions can offer. And it's a kind of itinerary is often described, a path is described, often with a number of steps that you follow in order to get from where you are to union with the divine, or some kind of also a kind of a deification, a sense of yourself becoming divine in some of the mystics. And it's an itinerary that is about an experience of personal transformation. So there's that's and it's and for as long as there have been human beings living in social groups, so if we go back to hominids living in Neolithic times, there was something like religion. There was religion as a social practice, something that people did, and there was something that was a special part of that religion, which we can think of as mystical. And that's it seems to be a permanent feature of the human condition, apart from perhaps aspects of modern secular Western life. So that's sort of interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
Growing up as a Catholic, they would talk about the great saints, the mystics.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, who were the great saints, the mystics?
They were, I mean, there's the early saints, being thrown into the Colosseum in Rome by various Roman emperors. And the lives of the saints were written much later and stories were told. But the kind of figures that I deal with in the book, a lot of medieval characters. So, we're talking about the high Middle Ages, the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th century, and an awful lot of women. So another really interesting and striking thing about the mystical tradition is it's a tradition which has been largely dominated by female authors. And some examples of that would be Teresa of Avila, in Spain in the 16th century, and Angela of Foligno in Italy in a couple of centuries earlier, and then Julian of Norwich is kind of the hero of the book. And these are people who, and one more to mention is a woman called Marguerite Porete, Porete. She is burnt at the stake as a heretic in 1310 in Paris because she refused to retract her book. She wrote a book on refined love that was called The Mirror of Simple and Annihilated Souls. So if you look at those characters, those are characters. Marguerite Porete was seen as a threat to the church, the Catholic Church, and she refused to back down, and she paid the price for that. And there are figures like Teresa of Avila, who was part of a movement of what were called the Illuminated Ones, the Alumbrados in Spain. And the church persecuted them and her friend John of the Cross. But eventually that was incorporated into the church. You've got people, say, like St. Francis, who was really, properly a heretic. He was, replicating in his body the stigmata of Christ, and also saying very radical things about the poverty of Christ and trying to get rid of private property and all of that. This was a huge threat to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church eventually incorporated the Franciscans into the church. So when mystics appear, they often appear because they get an audience, a decision to take, which is, on the one hand, mystics are good for business. They're attracting crowds. On the other hand, they often refuse to accept the authority of the church and therefore are trouble. So either the mystics get incorporated in the church, or their followers do, or they get expelled. They become declared heretics and pushed out. And Marguerite
I
Poret's
like
extreme.
that kind of trouble.
Oh, they're trouble. And then later on it gets even worse, because I mean worse, that what we think of as mystical experience uh, was a feature of the lives of monks and nuns in convents and monasteries all across Europe. And there was an institutional framework for that. When the Reformation kicks in the 16th century with Luther, the whole attitude towards the mystics changes. Things become very anti-mystical, and those kinds of phenomena, having visions, young women having visions of the divine or being possessed, are treated not with curiosity and interest, but are treated with increasing hostility. And that's when you begin to get things like witch trials in the late 16th, early 17th century, and that washes up in the early period in the United States, in New England, Salem witch trials famously. So there's a modern Reformed Christianity, modern Protestant Christianity often has a problem with mysticism, which it struggles with it. It doesn't. It's suspicious of it.
I love
Catholicism a
that.
little bit too, as well. Yeah.
Well, I love that kind of trouble. So, one of my earliest memories was being in Catholic school, and they would ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up? It was like a project we were working on. And I
Uh-huh.
said, I want to be a priest. And the nun, I remember, said, well, you can't be a priest. You're a woman. And I said, okay, well, then I'll be a nun. And she said, just so you know, you're not going to be able to have a family and you're not going to be able to have kids. And I don't believe that women have to get married or have kids, but I just knew that I wanted to have children one day. And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, okay, well, then I must not have good intuition because I just want to work for God and they're telling me I can't. And I see right now in society, I think back, like in the future, when historians look back, they're going to look at this period in time right now and say, the churches, the Christian and the
Mm-hmm.
Catholic Church, did not make any room whatsoever for female leadership. Even in
Mm-hmm.
the Christian churches, it's still different articles coming up each year. The Baptist Church doesn't want female leaders. Is the spiritualist movement today born out of there not being any room for female leadership within religion?
Yeah.
True
Then
female leadership.
there needs to be female leadership in religion, because women would almost certainly do a better job. There's no question about that. And of course, there is, Episcopalianism, which they have no problem with, you know, female priests in the Episcopal Church, bishops, and so on and so forth. So there are strands of Christianity in the United States which are open to women and where women can lead. Catholicism has got problems with that, let's just say, and I think it's I find that, really, really unfortunate. I mean, the nuns, you wanted to be a nun as a young girl. Well, yeah, you get married to Christ. Yeah, you get to marry God. That's pretty good. And he's not going to leave you. So a lot of what we think of as, I mean, nuns were very serious about the marriage to Christ, and the sense of Christ as being not just a matter of belief, but a matter of actual sensual presence. And there is wonderful stories of medieval nuns who had very physical, very, very oral relationships to God. There's one mystic who says, Madame Guyon, French mystic, who says God is all mouth. God is all mouth. That the relationship to God is primarily through the Eucharist, through the drinking of the wine and the eating of the body of Christ. And nuns also had there's a lot of cradles in medieval European churches and monasteries and places called béguinage, where there were these. There's maybe I could back up for a bit. There were the traditional nuns, and then in the early Middle Ages there were these figures called beguines, and beguines were, so it's Beguine, and they appeared in places like Flanders, in modern Belgium, and in Germany, and they were semi-enclosed nuns. So they were nuns, but they were allowed to kind of move in the world and and do social and even political stuff in the world. And they were also married to Christ, and they would have things like dolls. You know, there's lots of examples of Jesus dolls and Jesus cradles, and they're very touching, actually, these things. So
Yeah.
maybe not physical children, but children of a kind. And then you've got your followers. So a lot of the figures we think of as mystics, like Hildegard of Bingen, their children were the congregation, the fellow nuns that they had, their community around them was family.
Talk to us about Julia of Norwich, who's one of the
Oh
heroines.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Julian of Norwich was a woman in the born, we don't know for sure, mid 14th century. She's the first woman to write a book in English, of which we're certain, and that's itself extraordinary. So people that are interested in, say, the history of the English language or English literature, and they read perhaps Chaucer and texts like that, they should also be reading Julian of Norwich. This is the oldest text by a woman in English. She her story is very interesting. So let me tell you her story. So she is, we don't know her name. Her name, Julian, is taken from the church where she was an anchoress. I could get into that in a little while, what an anchoress meant. So we don't know her name. She gives very few biographical details in her book. There are two versions of her book, what's called the short text and the long text. And the long text is longer than the short text. But in the short text, she talks about the fact that she talks about being 30 and a half years old. Very interesting kind of dating, that 30 and a half. And, you know, this period, we know it's May 1373. We know that's in the text. That May 1373, 30 and a half years old, which in that period puts her in kind of, you know, middle age, you know, because people were dying at 50 or so. So she's not a spring chicken. And she wishes to suffer. Indeed, she wants to die like her Lord who died for her. So she wishes for the same suffering that Christ suffered on the cross, which we might find a strange wish, but that was her wish, and her wish becomes true. She begins to die, and she describes herself as losing the feeling in her legs going cold, her arms going cold, and they call in a parson, and the parson administers last rites to her as she's dying, and alongside the parson is someone that's described as a boy, and the boy is holding a crucifix, and as she's dying, she then begins to look at the crucifix, and the crucifix begins to ooze blood blood begins to pour from the crucifix. So she has this series of what she calls them showings or revelations, and they continue for about 12 or 13 hours. So not an awful long time, 12 or 13 hours. And those visions continue, and then they end. She wonders if she was crazy. She asks her priest, was I raving? She said, was I mad? And the priest says, no, you were not raving. And then she begins to write down those experiences. And then she begins to try and understand the meaning of those experiences. And then she spends the next 30 years of her life trying to work out the meaning of those experiences. And the meaning of those experiences, it turns out, is love. And she produces this extraordinary text, and she becomes an anchoress. So at some later point, not exactly sure when, she decides to become an anchoress. Now, an anchoress was someone that lived, or an anchorite was someone that lived in a sort of a side room in a church, so attached to a church, but in a little tiny room. And they were, to become an anchoress, you basically had to go through, again, last rites. You died to the world, and in that little anchor hold, there was a window where you could see the altar of the church and participate in the services at a certain distance. And basically, you stayed in that anchor hold until you died. And these figures, like Julian, became sort of counselors. They'd have somebody that was helping them out, bring them food, take away trash or whatever, and they would they'd receive people who wanted their counsel, their advice. And so Julian did that, because the second woman who wrote a book in English is a woman called Marjorie Kemp, and the Book of Marjorie Kemp refers to her meeting Julian, Dame Julian, as she calls her. She's an extraordinary, vivid figure who basically, amongst other things, entirely rewrites Christianity.
How does she rewrite Christianity? If you're searching for a community where you can share your beliefs openly, connect with kindred spirits, and feel truly supported, you're exactly where you need to be. My programs are more hands-on and unlike anything you've ever experienced before. Let's explore our upcoming events. In March, our membership topic of the month is exploring all spiritual gifts and how the world needs you. In this course, you'll learn all about the different types of spiritual gifts, what they are, and discover what kind of gifts you might have. This course is designed to help you understand what type of healer you might become and how you could use your gifts to make this world a better place. Then in April, we're diving into a new membership topic called Be Your Own Angel Messenger. I'll be teaching you how to receive angel messages for yourself on demand, anytime, anywhere, so you can navigate your life with a clear, divine roadmap, always at hand. And in May, members are doing an exciting 21-day Money Miracle Challenge, a journey designed to help you open new doors of prosperity and abundance in your life. Trust me, you won't want to miss these transformative experiences for members only. And don't forget, if you're ready to elevate your spiritual gifts to their fullest potential, whether to enhance your current career, enrich your personal life, or build your own spiritual business, join my Angel Reiki School. You can opt for our enlightening online 8-week course starting on the 1st of every month, or immerse yourself in our in-person session in Oak Brook, Illinois, from April 11th to the 13th, 2025, complete with online access. Step into a realm of angelic energy, profound clarity, and embrace limitless possibilities. Sign up today at theangelmedium.com. And for more details, check the show notes to book a call with me, Julie, to talk about how this program can unleash your hidden gifts and transform your path into one of soulful abundance.
She says over and over again, I did not see sin. She then has to try and make sense of sin because she knows that Holy Church, as she calls it, teaches that we're in a condition of sin, but she did not see that. So it doesn't really make sense to her. She then has to try and reconcile that with this conception of love. So instead of the Garden of Eden and temptation, the serpent and Eve tempting Adam, and then they both fall and get kicked out of paradise, and then we're sinned until we're condemned to original sin. We are in conditions of we are contaminated by original sin. Julian has this little story of what she calls the Lord and the servant, and the Lord is described as someone who's a Lord, God, and the servant is a servant who does the bidding of the Lord and loves the Lord very much, and loves the Lord so much that he goes off looking for something for the Lord, maybe some food for the Lord, and falls down into a ditch. And then she continues the parable of the Lord, the servant, to say that then God takes on human form and then retrieves that servant from the ditch and picks him back up. The fall wasn't because of a sin. The fall was because we love God so much and we were trying to do his bidding so much that we stumbled and fell, and we needed to be picked up. So it's a conception of Christianity without sin, without original sin, and without any idea of hell. She, her sort of mantra, if you like, the fridge magnet version of Julian is that all shall be well. All shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well. And so that's what she insists on, that all shall be well, all can be well. And she was living in a context of the Black Death, bubonic plague. People were dying around her. It's probable that she was married and had children and they died in the plague, and she somehow escaped from that. So the idea that she was, in some kind of cloud cuckoo land is ridiculous. She was in a context of suffering and contagion, and yet she can still say that all shall be well, and the meaning of what she was shown is love, and she is a remarkable figure.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
A couple of questions. So it's hard not to be a skeptic sometimes. And when she talks about passing away and this blood coming out of the cross, and Saint Francis and the stigmata, they're not metaphors. They're actually talking about blood coming out of a cross, blood coming out of a
Actual
cross.
blood. Yes.
And there are reports on this happening, not just with her or Saint Francis, but reports around the world. What do you think about that in all of your studies?
I believe what they believe. I mean, I teach philosophy as a day job, but I'm not by profession a skeptic. So if someone tells me sincerely that something happened, I tend to believe it. So if, William Blake, the great, London poet, when he was 7 years old, saw angels on a tree in his house in Peckham Rye in London, do I disbelieve that? No, I think he saw angels. And I think that Julian experienced blood. And I think that if we've lost that condition of belief, that's our problem, not their problem.
For sure.
Right? That we're missing something that we could perhaps do better to understand. I don't doubt for a second what Julian says, for example. I find
love
it very
that.
beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, and this has been, I know that you're not a historian per se, but I wonder if you have any insights to this, because it's a question that's been on my mind for a long time. So you have Jesus's time. Jesus didn't write anything down, but then you have Catholicism that kind of comes about. Everybody in Rome gets together, creates the religion. And then you have Martin Luther who comes along, who breaks apart from Catholicism. You have Christianity. And so when I grew up Catholic as a young child, you don't believe that you have to believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior to go to heaven. You believe that you're a good person, you do good works here on earth, and that helps you get into heaven. But then when my parents divorced, getting into a mega church, Christians believe that you have to believe in Jesus as as your personal Lord and Savior to go to the other side. But when was that idea introduced into humanity that you have to believe in Jesus in order to get to heaven?
You're kind of your own personal Jesus, to quote Depeche Mode. That, yeah, there's a little bit. It comes up more in I think in the Baptist tradition, doesn't it? It's the idea of walking alone with Jesus. That's that strand of Reformed Christianity that you find in the Baptist. That's very intense. I mean, Jesus is central. He his ministry only lasted for about 3 years, and he was crucified, and we have to remember what crucifixion was. It was the most humiliating and painful of deaths. He didn't write anything down, but then St. Paul did, and then the whole apparatus of the church begins to take shape, and somehow the weirdest historical fact is that the most powerful empire in the world, in the world until the modern era, the Roman Empire, then decides in the 4th century to adopt Christianity as its core faith, which is completely at odds with what the Romans used to believe. Anyway, that goes on.
Really? So how far was that after Jesus's passing?
That was Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, decides that Christianity will become the official religion of the empire in about 325.
Okay.
And then they have to sort out what's going to be believed. Then they develop their various meetings. There's the Council of Nicaea. So if you've been to a Catholic church or you've been to an Episcopal church, you will have recited the Nicene Creed. That Nicene Creed was formed at the Council of Nicaea in the late 4th century. And that was, and so that continues on, very, very long and complex story. But the Catholic Church had become, pretty corrupt by the late Middle Ages. Let's say the 14th, 15th century. So along comes someone like Martin Luther, a very vigorous and brilliant young monk and academic, and he's looking at the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church is in the business of selling indulgences and relics or pilgrimages, basically tourism, in order to buy time out of purgatory. He looks at the New Testament and says, there's nothing in the New Testament about this. This is all just made up. So he goes back to the text, and that's the engine that drives the Reformation. That really, Reformed Christians, Protestants, are people that believe it's only Scripture, solo scriptura. That's our access to God, the reading of the Bible, and our relationship to God is through faith and faith alone. Catholicism hangs on to all of these other deeper traditions, devotional traditions, and I think that gives a richer, deeper picture. A whole other thing to talk about is there's a whole world of Christianity that wasn't touched by this at all, which is Orthodox Christianity, Eastern Christianity, Greece, Ukraine, Russia, Syria. Those are deep Eastern Christian traditions where there was no Reformation and where mysticism was not treated with suspicion. It was always central to church activity. So for those people who don't know much about Orthodoxy, that's a lot of fun to find out about. There might be an Orthodox church in the neighborhood. Go and see what they're up to. And they have and they do. And Orthodox faith is very much about song. It's about singing and incredibly intense and complex rituals. So we have this idea of being in church as something prim and proper and there's a sermon, and you're trying to be on your best behavior. Whereas in the Orthodox Church, there's no sermons. There's just song and a whole complex canvas of rituals and practices, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I had no idea that Orthodoxy kept more of that mysticism.
Yes, it did.
Amazing.
It did. Yeah.
I want to touch on Sir Eckhart because you talk about him a lot in your book, and I think you tell some really great stories in here, and great readings from his work. But I want to talk about angels first. So,
Okay.
you talked about people and there being histories of people seeing angels physically, which I believe absolutely happens. Where do angels kind of fall within your work and like what you've looked at historically? And do you think that they've kind of gotten lost over the years?
Yeah, I think they've become a source of probably embarrassment to many Christians, right?
Why?
Angels, I think, because it just seems, it seems a little bit too preposterous, but I don't, that's not my view. I think that angels are, what's an angel? An angel's a messenger, right?
Yeah.
It's a messenger. It's some kind of adaptation of the idea of Hermes in the Greek pantheon, who's the messenger god, who's transmitting messages from the gods to humans. So when Hermes turns up, Mercury in Latin, we get a message and we should listen to it. So the idea that there are messengers, I find, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the messenger that most interests me is, the messenger who brings the news of the annunciation to Mary,
Mhm.
and she's surprised by that. Okay, so you are pregnant with God. How am I going to explain that to my husband? But she doesn't doubt that the angel has given a reliable message. So I think we could open our eyes a bit, open our hearts a little bit to things like angels. Again,
Yeah.
I'm not a skeptic, so I think if it means something to people, then I think it means something and has to be and demands to be understood.
Ooh, I think that's a great line.
All
If it
right.
means something to people, then I think it means something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think but people are not stupid. They're not gullible. And when it comes to their religious life, they take things. They want joy and all the rest, but they take things pretty seriously. And I think what's terrible is when that's looked down on by people like me living in the coastal elite cities of New York and such like, and I despise that kind of secular elitism, because it just closes off all sorts of dimensions of experience, which and also all sorts of dimensions of actual devotional practice that millions and millions of people are involved with. And why would you do that? Why would you just not try to understand those things empathetically rather than say these people are crazy?
Yeah. I love that. Thank you.
Okay, that's good.
Um, Simon, you talk about going to you were in school,
Yeah.
University of Essex,
Yes.
let's see, Catholic chaplaincy,
All
and
right.
you're going through this class, and then you get tapped. You're kind of doing like a reenactment, right? And you get tapped to play Sir Eckhart.
Right. So Meister Eckhart was a theologian in the late 13th, early 14th century. He dies in 1327. He is brilliant, a brilliant Dominican friar. The Dominicans were a particularly smart bunch of monks. Thomas Aquinas, the central theologian of the Catholic Church, was a Dominican, and in fact, so Eckhart was the only other person apart from Aquinas who became, on two occasions, was Master of Theology at the University of Paris. Okay, so he writes all these texts in Latin, and he's very well received. Then there's a sense of there being kind of trouble of things happening in the German speaking world, and he's a German speaker, and he's sent off to kind of do some missionary work in cities like Cologne and Strasbourg, which is now in France, but at the time was in the German speaking lands. And he goes to speak to novices, people, men and women training to be monks or nuns, and then gets a bigger audience and gives these sermons in German. So the first texts in German that we have in what's called Middle High German are texts written by Meister Eckhart. And these sermons are wild. He says all sorts of extraordinary things like, I pray to God to rid me of God. And things like that. And so his view is that we have to learn to push ourselves aside, to empty ourselves in order to be open. So what we have to do is to pour ourselves out from ourselves into the experience of the divine. And God also, which is what makes Christianity so interesting, has to pour itself out into us. So it's like almost to do it in terms of images of liquid. We're a glass that's poured out, and God is a glass that's poured out. And where those two things meet and merge is what Eckhart calls the Godhead. And the Godhead is neither God nor the human being, but something in the middle, some kind of third space. And that's central to his teaching, trying to get to that. And to get to that point, he has these two concepts of what he calls releasement and detachment, so that we have to be released from the will, from our consciousness, our sense of ourselves, to be open to an experience that is beyond us. And if we can achieve that released state, we can become detached from our creaturely day-to-day concerns. And so he's doing this in with ever bigger audiences, and it's a great success. But of course, other clerics are looking at this thinking, this guy is too popular and dangerous, and I'm not sure if what he's saying is heresy or not. So he then gets investigated by the Pope. And this time in the early 14th century, for about 60 years, actually, there are two popes. There's a pope in Rome and a pope in Avignon in France. There's the period of the dual papacy. So he goes to Avignon and he's investigated. And then he dies in Avignon. It's not in dire straits. He's being looked after by his fellow Dominicans, but he dies. He's pretty old by this time. And a year after he dies, several articles from his texts are found to be heretical, and a papal bull is issued in 1328 denouncing him as a heretic. So going back to that story, when I was a student in the Catholic chaplaincy at the University of Essex, the father there, called Father Michael Butler, I was chosen to play the part of Meister Eckhart, and he excommunicated me in Latin, and that's the kind of thing
Well, and it's
you
so
don't forget that.
interesting. In your book, you talk about how the Catholic Church just didn't understand his intellect at that time. And
Yeah.
that seems to be a theme. If they don't understand a spiritual experience, they write it
Mm-hmm.
off. And if they don't understand, somebody who's smarter or interpreting things at a higher level, they write it
Mm-hmm.
off.
Yeah.
And on page 105, you say, you kind of
Okay.
give one of Eckhart's lines. If I myself were not God, if I myself were not, God would not be either.
Right.
That God is God, of this I am a cause. If I were not God, you read this.
Yeah. If I myself were not, God would not be either. That God is God. Of this I am a cause. If I were not, God would not be God. And then he adds after that, there is, however, no need to understand this. So that's a typical Eckhart moment. He says this wild stuff.
Yeah.
He's kind of free jazz at this point, and then he says, "But you don't need to understand this." But the point is a deep point in the sense in which God is God for us. Right? God is God for us, and if I were not, God would not be God. God would not have to have, taken on incarnate human form to redeem fallen humanity in the standard Christian picture. So the relationship between the human being and God is a relationship of dependency, right? A relationship of familiarity, and that's what makes the Christian tradition, I think, so fascinating, because the Christian God is an incarnate God, a sensuous God, a human God, and that's not the case in Judaism. Still waiting for the Messiah. In prophetic religions like Islam, there's no possibility that God could become incarnate. And then the other really, I want to get this in because this is really good stuff, is that this takes us back to Julian, but it's sort of in the air, is that the gender of Christ is really up for grabs. So Julian has this idea of what she calls Jesus as our mother. Jesus is our mother.
Explain this.
Well, Jesus has a super sensuous father and a sensuous mother, Mary. And there is this, firstly, there's this familiar tradition of God as a kind of paternal authority, as sort of daddy in the house. But there is this other tradition, particularly in Christianity, of Christ as a kind of Christ as a nurturing force who gives from his own body, and in particular when the body of Christ was depicted in medieval Christianity, it was with the wounds, but the particular wound that was always emphasized was the side wound. The side wound is the wound that's just underneath the heart, where he gets stabbed with a spear by a Roman soldier, and that side wound becomes the main preoccupation. And the side wound is just below the breast, just below the nipple. So there's this medieval preoccupation with the blood of Christ, which nourishes and redeems, and the links between that and milk, right? So in a sense that in medieval physiology, the belief was that blood and milk came from the same source. So Christ is our nurturing mother in that tradition, and that's the way Julian emphasizes it, and it even gets compared, and this is fascinating, to a pelican. So pelicans were symbols that appear in medieval Christianity all over the place. And the belief was, it's wrong, but it's a great belief, that pelicans fed their young from the blood, from their own blood. The pelicans would peck at their chests, make themselves bleed, and their young would be fed from that. And that becomes what medievals called a figura, an image for Christ. But the outcome of all of that, the really wild outcome of all of that, is that Christ is female on that picture. Christ is a mother, and a mother who has a particularly strong relationship with women, right? With people like Julian of Norwich. And so that really twists around the standard view of Christianity. It's not just daddy in the sky, it's mummy down here on earth. And that's the important stuff. So Jesus as mother, how about that?
If we had accepted that and embraced that more,
Mm-hmm.
would that have changed where we are today?
Yeah, the idea that it would have got rid of the idea that if Jesus is our mother, if Christ is in a sense both male and female, a kind of a much more gender fluid kind of God, then the idea that only men could control access to the divine, priests, and therefore, as you were saying before, female leadership in the Catholic Church, maybe that wouldn't have been ruled out of bounds, and we'd be in a very different place. And it's also interesting the mystics that Julian and Marjorie Kemp. I mean, Marjorie Kemp, for example, has 14 children, of whom I think 6 die, in very early years. It was quite common infant mortality in that period. And at the age of 40, she asks her husband to stop having sex with her so she doesn't have to have any more children. And he agrees. and then she goes off on her pilgrimages. But the point is that these mystics were not, they weren't kind of 18-year-olds, right, who were having visions of the Virgin Mary. They were mature women who had lived and been married and had children, and then decided to go off in another direction. So you don't have to be young to be a mystic. You can be an older mystic too. So for those people out there who are a certain age, there's, there are possibilities yet.
Oh, you are speaking our language, Simon. You are speaking directly to us. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy with us. Your new book is just amazing, Mysticism by Simon Critchley. And where can everybody find you, Simon?
What do you mean? Like
website?
Oh, website. Yeah, simoncritchley.com. No. Is it simoncritchley.org? Let me just check that. It's simoncritchley.something. You can see how I'm really bang up to date. It's simon-critchley.com.
We'll put that in the show notes and the link to buy the book.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Of course. Have a beautiful, blessed day.
All right. You too. Good to speak to you. All right. See you. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope you're feeling a renewed sense of clarity and a deep connection to the angelic guidance that surrounds you right here, right now. If you need help hearing and working with your angels, join me in the membership for an experience unlike any other. If you're seeking personal insights, book a reading with me. Each reading brings you the loving, positive messages your angels and loved ones in heaven need you to hear right now. And if you're ready to unleash your hidden gifts and transform your path into one of soulful abundance, develop all your spiritual gifts to the max in my Angel Reiki School in person in Oak Brook, Illinois, April 11th through the 13th, 2025. This immersive experience isn't just about learning. It's your gateway to unlocking your intuition to its fullest potential, learning the skills of how to bring through angel messages for others, mediumship, and you're going to become an energy healer too. All of this all in one weekend at the Angel Reiki School in person. If you can't attend in person, we have an 8-week online program with live Saturday calls. Graduates say the Angel Reiki School gives them an advantage in their personal and professional lives. After completing the program, your heightened intuition becomes a tool you will use for the rest of your life. Whether you're launching your own healing business or elevating your current career, you'll operate from a place of deep wisdom and clarity. Your decisions will be guided by a divine insight that sets you apart, opening doors to opportunities that truly resonate with your passion for healing and soulful, abundant living. For more details, please visit theangelmedium.com and go to the Angel Reiki School tab. I'm Julie, and I can't wait to guide you on this remarkable journey. Until next time, keep radiating your unique, beautiful energy into this world and listening to your angels. I love you, friends.